Hi, my name is Monroe Mann of Unstoppable Artists, and this is Before the Big Break. We're here in beautiful Valley Stream, Long Island. You can see it's a beautiful summer day at the home of a gentleman named Dan Lurie. And this man's story is quite possibly bigger than his biceps. Follow me, I'll explain. Three-time Mr. America's Most Muscular Man, founder of the Dan Lurie Barbell Company and publisher of 6 international fitness magazines. Not to mention the fact that he co-starred with Mr. Ed McMahon on the Emmy-nominated television show Seal Test Big Top, which was huge back in the day. It's a pleasure to introduce Mr. Dan Lurie.
Monroe, it's a real pleasure to meet you today.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, my pleasure.
Dan, you were one of the most famous bodybuilders of all time, and if my facts are correct, you were Mr. America's Most Muscular Man for 3 years in a row. Can you tell us about this?
That's right, Monroe. In 1942, 1943, and 1944, in those days it was political. The man who ran the shows controlled the shows. He didn't want someone from Brooklyn that wasn't in his organization to win the Miss America title.
I take it you're from Brooklyn.
From Brooklyn. And they disqualified me in 1945 saying I was professional, which was a lot of bunk. But that was one way, since he controlled the AAU at the time, he had all the power. And I was out of bodybuilding at that time. But at that time, in around 1942, a young man from Montreal, Canada, wrote to me. His name was Joe Weider, and he came down. He stayed at my home. We became good friends. We ended up being business partners in the barbell business only. Since he published a magazine, the ads were free. All the rent. In those days, there was no rent. I used my mother's basement at the time. There was no help. I was the only
So you started your business on a complete shoestring.
Maybe I had $20. That's it.
And this is the Lurie Barbell Company, correct?
Dan Lurie Barbell Company.
The Dan Lurie Barbell Company.
And after 6 or 7 years, maybe the first year we did $5,000 for the year, the first year. So of course there was no profit. But when it started to go over $100,000 a year, Joe Weider did not want to share the profits with me. So he dropped my ads and changed the name to Joe Weider Barbell Company. And of course I took him to court. We had a contract. The judges got most of the money. I did not. That was it. I lost out. So I went on to my own mail order business, and slowly
you retook the name the Dan Lurie.
I always had the name. Sure. It was registered in 1943, 42. It was registered at the time, and I started to package the barbells that weren't packaged for department stores, the sporting goods stores. I created a box, and how do you ship the barbells? There was no corrugated boxes strong enough to hold them at the time. You got to remember, they didn't have the knowledge at that time. And little by little, I ended up selling maybe 90% of the East Coast on barbells and sporting goods. And the business just grew bigger. I started to publish my own magazine, Muscle Training Illustrated, in 1965. I had a partner. After 16 issues, he says, Dan, we're not making any money. He says, I want out. He was a publisher. He published wrestling magazines, boxing magazines. By that time, I felt I had a little knowledge of the publishing business. And I says, I'll tell you what, I'll give you back every penny you paid in. I could have negotiated where it was given, but I gave him back his money. I took over the magazine. I got a new printer. I bought my own paper. Since the other guy had a big office on 42nd Street and 9th Avenue, big overhead, that was his expenses. I didn't have no overhead. I went to my barbell company office, and there we published and did all the artwork, and the first issue I put out, I made money. From then on,
So what's the lesson there? Is that
the lesson is, if you have confidence in yourself, you cannot listen to others if you have confidence in yourself, Monroe. Remember, I started life with a heart murmur. A heart, I had a hole in my heart when I was born. They told my parents not to expect me to live over the age of 5.
and now you're at what? I think 85.
I'm 85.
So you beat the odds by 80 years.
I'm going on 80, and this April 1st, I'll be 86 years young.
Wow.
I never like to use the word old because, like my granddaughter just gave birth the other day, how could a baby be 1 day old? How old is she got to be 1 day young. They got to change the rules. Everyone has to be young. You don't say old.
I like
So
that.
they learn the word old. Everything, oh, I'm 21, I'm old. All their life they're old. You got to be young. So you're 21
So
years
you're 85 years young.
young. That's it. That's my philosophy in life.
That's a good philosophy.
Yeah.
That's a good
And
philosophy.
it kept on growing. And thank God I raised a family of 5 children, 15 grandchildren, and now 6 great grandchildren. So that's what do you want more
So-
out of life?
Maybe great grandchildren.
I won't be around.
I don't know.
I won't be around.
You're beating the odds so
I
far.
won't be around. One never knows, you know. There is no secret to live longer. You can exercise, you can eat right, but that doesn't make you live longer.
Going back to bodybuilding, how did you get involved with this? Was this something you did when you were a kid, or
Well, when
You were older?
when I was a kid, at age 13 to 16, I actually trained in a professional gym in Brooklyn, Furky's Gym.
Furky's?
Yeah, Furky's Gym.
Furky's
yeah,
gym.
yeah.
Still around or no?
I don't think so. On Livonia Avenue, across the street where Fortuno's got started in their business. They probably would have had a store there too. And I would take the 5-cent subway and go to the gym. My brother was a good boxer. After 3 years, I said, good enough, I'm going to enter the Golden Gloves that was sponsored by the Daily News. And
What year was this that you entered the Golden Gloves?
the Golden Gloves had to be about 1939.
Or right before, I guess, yeah, right.
39.
Wow.
I was 16, of course. They examined me, and I didn't even think about my heart murmur. And the doctor said, hey, son, you can't fight. You can never fight.
So you still had the heart murmur?
I still had the heart murmur, but I did boxing. I didn't go into bodybuilding. I just trained for a fight.
For boxing. So you were already breaking the rules by going into the Golden Gloves?
Yeah, well, I never had a fight. I was probably, I could say I was probably one of the best trained fighters in the world that never had a fight. I never fought. Of course, I felt bad and I cried and I felt bad. And a young fella come over, says, I'm a friend of your brother Morris. He says, I used to be a fighter, a damn good fighter. And he says, no matter how good you are, there's always someone that comes along and beats the hell out of you. So you're better off. He said, you got a nice body. Why don't you go into bodybuilding? I said, what's bodybuilding? Well, his name was Terry Robinson.
No, he's a famous
He's
bodybuilder, right?
Not only was he a famous bodybuilder, what's more famous, he was the trainer for the athletes in California when he went out to Hollywood. And he became very close friends, living with Mario Lanza and his 4 children. And when Mario died in Italy, and there's a whole story on it.
Did you know Mario Alonso?
No,
Oh.
no, but I always loved him. I sing, I imitate him, but that's all I can do is imitate
Are you
him.
going to give us an invitation?
Oh, I'll be glad to, and I'll even tell you the first big star who I met, who was my other idol in my life, and that was just by luck I met him. Anyway, when Terry Robinson received the phone call that Mario had died, and he raised his 4 children. His wife died maybe 3 or 6 months after that. Terry is now 92 years young.
And he raised Mario Alonso's
Oh yeah,
children?
they all call him uncle. Yeah, one of the children died. There's 3 left. So it's a great story, and not only that, his wife was in a car accident, and she's been in a wheelchair most of her life, and he takes care of her.
Oh, that's
And
sweet.
so that shows a human person, a human being. Very nice.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, speaking of bodybuilding, you've trained. I think did you train Joe Weider, or were you involved? I know you trained Lou Ferrigno.
What I did, he would come in from Canada, and at that time I had a gym on Clarkson Avenue in Brooklyn. That was my first gym. And then I moved to Pitkin Avenue, and I had my second gym. I had 2 floors there, and I would teach him how to train, because I guess
Is this Lou or this is Joe?
no, this is Joe Weider, and he never really amounted to anything, but being owning your own magazines, you could make your pictures look as great as possible by putting your head on other people's bodies and doing tricky artwork, and that's what he's famous for. So, but good luck to him. No matter how much money he has, he'll never touch the happiness that I have with my wife and family, because he doesn't have a family.
Mm-hmm.
And
your wife is quite beautiful.
Thank you. And I introduced Joe Weider to his first wife on a pickup on a plane when we went to Florida. And while I was in Florida driving around, I passed by the Traymore Hotel, and there I said, oh, is that who I think it is? He's my hero. He's sitting on the front porch, deck, whatever you want to call it, with a turtleneck sweater, nice and tan. And I said, Dan, should I stop or go? I said, stop. So I parked and I walked over to him, and his name was Al Jolson. Al Jolson was one of the greatest singers of all time. He was the first singer who made talking movies, the jazz singer, and he was very kind to me, very nice. And I always liked to sing his songs where I sang it when I got married 61 years ago. And it was, oh, how we danced on the night we were wed, we vowed our, and so on, you know.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
He was one of your
One of my
big
He
heroes.
was one of my big heroes in life. He was everyone's hero. Him and Mario Alonso was my 2 greatest.
Well, since you just gave your impersonation of Al Jolson, you have to give us your impersonation of Mario Alonso.
My voice is not the best.
Oh, it's wonderful.
I just had a eye surgery, so it's. I don't know how it affected my voice, but it.
I think it sounded great. Greg, what do you think? With Lou Ferrigno, you were the man who was responsible for his...
Well, with Lou came, it was brought to me by someone who worked for me by the name of Tony Vidal. I always like to give credit to people who who deserves the credit.
Sure.
I did not find him. He brought him to my office. He was 6'5", about 165 pounds, and very skinny for that weight. And I asked him one question: how far do you want to go into bodybuilding? And he says, I said, I could make you Mr. America in about 3 years. He says, I don't want to be no Mr. America. He says, I want to be the best built man that ever lived. I says, you realize what you're saying? So I immediately planned a campaign with my magazine that this young kid of 16 was going to challenge the great Arnold Schwarzenegger, who my wife and I met at the airport when he first came to this country in 1968.
Wow.
And that he would be able to beat Arnold Schwarzenegger. It was a long shot. the reason why I did it, I wanted people to say, he must be crazy. How is he going to beat this skinny kid? But I kept playing him up in my magazine every issue. In every issue, he trained harder and harder. You know, all it takes is inspiration and hard work. And before you know it, he was 175, 200, 235, 250.
This is muscle.
Massive muscle.
Unbelievable.
And then in 1971, I ran a show, Junior Mr. America in Asbury Park. And of course, he won. He deserved to win. He was great. And we were together for around 6 or 7 years. Never had a contract with him. I treated Lou like he was a son rather than a bodybuilder. And I would, when he went to compete in other shows, I would buy his clothes for him, because he was a sheet metal worker. And he worked.
So Lou Ferrigno, before his big break, worked in a sheet metal factory.
Yeah, that's where he worked, sheet metal worker, yes.
Wow.
And what happened in 1972, I ran the Pro Mr. America contest. Weeder, being jealous of my show, decided to run his show on the same day in the same city.
Oh boy.
He wanted to destroy me. Well, it turned out that my show was a tremendous hit because my secret weapon was I brought in from Switzerland at the time one of the greatest movie stars, bodybuilding heroes of all time, Steve Reeves, star of the Hercules pictures.
Hercules, oh yes, of course,
tremendous,
sure.
Yeah. So, of course, rumors were flying around. It's not true. He's not going to come to the show. He's in Switzerland, and he's just making you want to come. P.S. My show not only was a tremendous hit, we had to put extra seats on the stage, on the side of the stage. But what happened at that time, the night before, Lou looked unbeatable. Of course, he was my #1 man. I wanted him to win. But I never judged my own shows because I know what goes on as judging. They get together in cliques, and there's favoritism. They work in their gym. They vote for their own man. I know that, but I picked out 19, so it was very hard to get 19 people to agree. They got to be fair.
Do this fair
and
equitably.
And when Lou showed up for the show, he looked so smooth. He took the water pill and made what wins in bodybuilding is the definition. He looked smooth. Even though I wanted him to win, he didn't win. Someone who represented the Weeder group, he won. And when he won, he cried on the stage because they said, don't even compete with Lurie because he's not going to let you win.
Wow. Well, let me shake your hand for doing things the right way.
And
That's great.
Lou's father, Matty, was very angry at me. Why I didn't let even though I was his #1 boy, he was my number, that I didn't let him win, that he signed a contract with Joe Weeder and left me without even saying anything, just left. And that's life. Life goes on.
Safari with Manny Safari and cruise the Bahamas with Julia Roberts, go romping around with Christina and Brittany and go to the beach with Christina Ricci. The Hollywood girls around my mind, I want them all to stand in line. I want them all to shake our hands. I want them tour Italy with Angelina Jolie, and go backpacking with Anna Paquin. Ride my moped with Jennifer Lopez, and go to the movies with Cameron Diaz. And run in the fields with Jessica Biel. I wanna hang nightly with Keira Knightley. I think I'm in love with Anna Kournikova. I wanna know more about Mandy Moore and cover the Hollywood girls who are my mind. I want them all to stand in line. I want them all to shake our hands. I want them all to be crazy morning fans. Woohoo! But you know it's true. The only girl I love is you. I wanna go on a date with Ash American, drink a Snapple.